Jeunesses Anticapitalistes, on s'est rendu en Ukraine pour participer à un congrès des universités en guerre. On s'est dit que c'était important d'y participer justement pour tenter de créer des liens concrets avec des militants et militantes ukrainiennes et notamment dans la jeunesse.
Donc, le but c'est de faire des retours d'expérience sur nos luttes au sein des universités dans les différents pays, voir quelles actions fonctionnent, lesquelles ne fonctionnent pas, se donner des conseils là-dessus. Et le but aussi c'est de créer une solidarité concrète avec les Ukrainiens, que ce soit par rapport aux effets de la guerre en Ukraine. On peut voir qu'à Lviv par exemple, il y a des grosses difficultés pour se loger. Il y a beaucoup d'étudiants qui sont déplacés jusqu'ici. Et puis la question par exemple que les Ukrainiens ils n'ont pas le droit de sortir d'Ukraine actuellement.
Well, I'm really happy that it took place here in Lviv, the city where lots of internally displaced people have flocked to stay safe from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and there were even some members of Priama Diia who are internally displaced people, so they know the realities of war way too much. So my name is Pavlo Bujati. I am a member of this current generation of Priama Diia, the fourth generation from its start actually, winter of 2022-2023. When it came into fruition. And Priama Diia has been quite a generational project. As I've mentioned, we are the fourth generation. We've existed as a trade union in some form or another from the 1990s. And we have been revived several times. And each of those generations was in the middle of the left-wing politics in Ukraine, particularly during the 2000s, early 2010s. When there were massive protests, massive student protests, especially for political reasons like the Euromaidan protests. Some of our Priama Diia activists were involved in it. And right now we are trying to push social agenda during wartime, which is quite necessary for Ukraine during the Russo-Ukrainian war.
It's important that we also visit the Ukrainian comrades because they are currently facing a lot of struggles and because of war, but not only because of war. And we should not treat Ukraine like some opposite, the only country you cannot visit, but you need to also stay in actual touch and not only go to places such as Germany or France or Great Britain, but also see other places and talk to people there and make connections there, because it's extremely important, especially in the times of war.
C'est important d'avoir des discussions sur comment est-ce que les mobilisations étudiantes se passent en Ukraine et comment est-ce qu'on peut aussi aider ces mobilisations avec Priama Diia, comment construire ces solidarités internationales.
Oui, ce qui a été notamment dit par les camarades ukrainiens et ukrainiennes, c'était aussi la nécessité de les considérer comme des camarades comme les autres et donc de tenter de créer une solidarité qui soit effective et qui passe notamment par le fait de se rencontrer et de venir en Ukraine pour voir comment est-ce que ça se passe pour eux, comment est-ce que les mobilisations se passent pour eux et elles.
Ces questions-là sont hyper importantes ici par rapport à tout ce que subissent les étudiants ukrainiens, sur les attaques aussi sur les universités où il y a de moins en moins de droits, c'est de plus en plus dur de se loger, etc.
I think that sharing the purpose and the perspective between West and East, it could be really creative and can also let them see that there's a solidarity and we all are in the same shitty system.
Thanks to our comrades from Italy, from Poland, from the United States, we are now able to properly gauge what we can do in Ukraine, because you have so many really inspiring tactics, really varying tactics. We are becoming more and more adaptable. We are trying to keep up with capitalist adaptation of different policies, but we are trying to adapt in our own way in fighting for social struggles.
Il y y avait au cours de ce week-end plusieurs délégations de pays différents qui étaient présentes, avec donc des étudiants et des étudiantes qui sont venus aussi rendre compte des réalités et de leur contexte et des mobilisations dans leur pays. Et donc en fait, le but de ce week-end, c'était vraiment de partager les pratiques de chacun et chacune, de discuter de ce qui avait pu marcher, de ce qui n'avait pas fonctionné, que ce soit par exemple sur des enquêtes qui ont été menées sur le mal logement en Pologne, des étudiants et des étudiantes, ou sur des occupations de fac, par exemple aux États-Unis. Le but était vraiment d'apprendre les uns des autres.
My name is Asia. I came from Italy, and I'm a part of autonomous space that have like an intersectional perspective. So in different way and different tactics, we are trying to actually make people aware about different struggle from anti-capitalist to anti-patriarchal perspective and so on, because all the struggle are interconnected, and being here is like a confirm about that, because we all are struggling about the same topic, even if we are in such a different context and so on. Of course, it was like pretty interesting the way the other nation is actually trying to build a struggle in a different way, and trying to move and to encourage people that actually are not aware of what is going on around them, and make them understand how they can do the difference.
Donc ce qui était vraiment intéressant sur ce congrès et qui peut changer de discussions qu'on a entre différentes organisations, c'est qu'on ne s'est pas arrêté sur des discussions uniquement théoriques sur notre vision du monde, etc. Mais surtout sur quelle solidarité concrète et quelles actions concrètes est-ce qu'on peut mener dans les universités en train de s'échanger sur comment est-ce que les personnes se mobilisent, peu importe sur quelle question, mais sur comment, par quels moyens, quelles actions concrètes on peut mettre ça en place.
It's just an idea because we tried this kind and it worked.
Yeah, I'm afraid that what I'm afraid in this solution is that it would take really a lot of resources and keep us away from different actions and kind of immobilize us with this bureaucracy that should be done by the university. And when we have to study, right, not work. But yeah, it's one of the solutions, definitely.
Usually, from my experience, this situation is usual when you have a protest, like the representatives of some administration come and say, okay, we will take your demands and we will implement them. But then after the protest, it vanishes because you have no contacts, you have no, they will not write to your email of your organization and say, we've done this, this and this. So it's important somehow to materialize this protest, this spontaneity, in order to have a contact and direct control over the process.
It's lame to join with the university, like you were just against them and now you have to talk and so on. So I don't know, just emotionally kind of. I want to stay radical.
Well,
it's also important to remember that because of the globalization, we share the same issues around the universities, and the universities function pretty much the same everywhere, and we share a lot of the same problems. So when we talk together about the problems and about the ways we fight, we can figure out better ways to fight, and we can also connect the struggles. And sometimes there will be more shared struggles, sometimes there will be less. Like when we see historically, sometimes students were able to connect no matter where they were from, and to organize a mass movement. And right now we are in the place where we need to regain and get in touch again, so that we can start building something that can flourish in a couple of years as well. So it's very important that we do not only focus on the stuff in our country, but we look broader. Yeah.
It's very good that we can exchange this experience between ourselves, to learn something more, to learn some situation which you face in your country, and to understand that we are not one in our troubles, Even if we live in a different context, we face the same problem, and it means something, and it means that we need some global changes and so on.
C'était très intéressant d'avoir les points de vue des différents pays. On peut voir, par exemple, sur les questions du féminisme, on peut voir la question de la Palestine. C'est très, on a eu des retours d'expérience d'une étudiante américaine qui nous a expliqué ce qui s'est passé sur son campus, où il y a eu des grosses mobilisations pour la Palestine. Donc ça aide aussi à avoir des perspectives sur qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire en France, quelle solidarité, quel internationalisme on peut construire, toutes ces questions-là. Et surtout, ce qui je trouve intéressant, c'est de réfléchir à aussi comment est-ce qu'on peut réussir à apporter cette question de la solidarité avec les étudiants ukrainiens, comment apporter de l'aide aussi aux organisations comme Priama Diia depuis la France.
Parce que oui, il y a le sentiment en fait que l'Ukraine n'existe pas comme sujet, qu'en fait ils méritent pas qu'on les soutienne alors qu'ils sont dans des conditions qui sont terribles.
Donc nous, ce soutien pour l'instant au sein de notre organisation, ça se matérialise surtout par du contenu, essayer de visibiliser ce qui se passe en Ukraine, essayer de visibiliser cette organisation.
We are trying to stay on top of university politics. We're trying to always challenge the politics of universities, because they are oftentimes universities are quite corrupt, and they're trying to do anything to save money on students and even earn money, like selling lands, like renting lands to private constructors so that they would construct buildings on it, and also saving money on food for students. There have been scandals like in Kyiv that several universities, that one university was overpaying money for meat. So they were basically using that excess money for filling the pockets with this excess money. And we're trying to keep progressive politics alive at universities, because we have a history in Ukraine of progressive student politics, but they're mostly forgotten. We're trying to revitalize that and make students remember them. Since our revival in 2023, we have been experimenting with different strategies, so that we could at least, at the very least, make students pay attention to social problems. Creating leaflets with legal help, with legal aid for students, so that they could apply to us with some advice on living in dormitories, because they have their specific laws that are dictated by the university.
Mais déjà, il y a le fait que ça a fait émerger tout un tas de sujets qu'on connaît pas, sur la manière dont en fait la guerre a un impact sur les jeunes, les étudiants et les étudiantes, et que c'est des sujets qui sont peu traités. Par exemple, un des sujets qui a été abordé, c'est notamment le mal logement des étudiants et étudiantes en Ukraine, et qui est un problème qui est de plus en plus important. Donc il y a des conditions de vie vraiment hyper compliquées pour les étudiants et les étudiantes, qui sont entassés dans des dortoirs quand ils le peuvent, parce qu'en fait c'est impossible de se loger.
For the students, in Lviv, there are a lot of students from the different parts of Ukraine. So the most common for them is live in dormitory, and the conditions there are not very good. For example, our activists on the summit have talked about the situation 2 years ago when there was the bombing of Lviv, and the windows were destroyed, and the students lived for few months without windows in their room during the autumn, where it was getting cold. So they had to make a protest to already install the windows. Also, the most common problem there is that they have very small spaces for the students. There is a system when you live in the block, and there is a room for 2 and 3 people, and usually you have 6 meters, square meters for the person. The space is not always enough to study properly. The other problem that we see is the poor conditions of bathrooms, the shower, the mold which can be in the shower or in the rooms, the cockroaches. You can meet them very often, and that was a real problem, not only for the lack of the space, but also lack of the furniture. A lot of students just simply didn't have a bed to sleep. They have to sleep on the floor, and also they didn't buy enough of furniture to have enough amount of water for them, so they didn't have warm water. And our activist was talking with the administrator when you will put enough the electric stuff to have a warm water, but the administrator was really against our activist. They have forbidden to our students to entry to the dormitory. And when our students have the meeting with the students inside of the dormitory, tells them that they can create some like group of the students which will be interested in the solving of this problem, and you can solve your problem actually. We can provide you some patterns how to deal with this. Administration of the dormitory got scared, and it started to do something with, for example, with warm water. And now we like this process is still in the is going, but we already have some patterns how to starting this process with another dormitory. But this problem, which I describe, is very common for my regret. It's very common between like in Ukraine.
De pouvoir avoir des personnes qui nous parlent de leur mobilisation, les différentes luttes, avoir accès à ce que les gens ont envie d'en dire ici, ça m'a paru hyper important.
What you can do? Well, it's quite a loaded question to be honest, because we are now actively trying to make Russia pay its dues for its destruction of Ukraine. When people claim that the US is the imperialist country that is responsible for everything, people tend to forget that Russia is not the great example of progressive politics at all. And we are trying to remind everyone of that, so that people remember that imperialism isn't tied to the United States. And we are also students are trying to look at this, to advance this as well. And also, in regards, for instance, to European integration, we are bound to join the European Union. And I believe that you can try to scrutinize our neoliberal reforms, that they go against some common sense European policy, like Scandinavia's social state, France's social state, where people were literally protesting the retirement age increase, and they were launching massive protests on this. We want to feel this momentum for social change in Europe as well, so that we are forced to go by it, and not try to cut it out.
Et cette solidarité aussi, ça se matérialise aussi concrètement en venant en Ukraine aussi pour discuter avec les militants et militantes ukrainiens et voir quels besoins est-ce qu'ils ont concrètement, qu'est-ce qu'on peut aider et comment est-ce qu'on peut aider là-dessus.
And also it's very good for our students who not participating in some companies to they understanding that they are not alone, and that we have some international students and international support from them. We can use this not in some like a corporative way, but it will inspire our students to fight more, to deal with their problem more, because they will understand that it's not like only our problem, this is a common problem, and they will see how you are fighting, so they will be more inspired and so on.
This forum came at a great time of necessity, because Ukraine being at war forces us to redefine a lot of things, redefine our priorities, our political priorities, and particularly the way our universities function, because they've changed their functions a lot during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In particular, when our neoliberal government began accelerating the reforms because of the fog of war and the lack of democratic oversight. And it's really important that we came here. I think we've managed to do this. We have way too many perspectives, way too many quality perspectives that we have shared and we've tried to reflect on. So on that note, I think we should end our Congress today. So officially I declare the Congress is closed.
Now we should clean this place. bar. Pretty cool bar. And we should be at the bar at 19:30. If we can't come, they will give it to other people. 19:30. But like.